This is Talk with the Times at the Loudoun Times-Mirror in Leesburg, Virginia.
Hello and welcome to Talk with the Times. I'm your host, David Onofrio. Joining me again today is Nicholas Graham, Editor-at-Large of the Loudoun Times-Mirror. Nicholas, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the big news this week, people ran to the polls and went and voted on Tuesday in the town elections across Loudoun County. Some interesting stuff out there, some not so interesting stuff out there. Let's start in the county seat here in Leesburg.
Sure.
Incumbents across the board. What did we find out in Leesburg?
Well, Leesburg, Mayor Umstattd won, which wasn't a surprise to a lot of people. I think Councilmember Dunn put up a pretty good race. Incumbents on the town council won pretty much walking away. So I think it shows that people are pretty happy with Leesburg and the way things are run here, and no real surprises.
Right. Councilman Dunn came within about 260 some odd votes of the mayor, the closest race she's had, I think, in quite some time. Going over to Purcellville, Mayor Lazzaro was unopposed in this, but there was a last-second write-in campaign orchestrated by Mickey Mouse of asking people to vote for Mickey Mouse.
He's an aggressive campaigner.
Well, he's got a lot of history, and people do love him. He's got great name ID.
Well-known brand, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Mickey Mouse, or some write-in candidate, received 207 votes,
yeah.
And then there were approximately 155 write-ins that were not properly marked. They were blanks. So that's 362 write-ins of some manner, about 30% for against Mayor Lazzaro, who obviously won going away. Is there anything to read into that in Purcellville?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think Mickey Mouse probably has a really good chance at a political career in Purcellville after
Right.
Mayor Lazzaro
Right.
leaves. Second of all, I think Mayor Lazzaro's done a very good job, I think, in Purcellville and has strong recognition there. I think if somebody was really interested in running against Mayor Bob, they would have run a real person against Mayor
Right.
Bob, and they didn't.
Not just a mouse.
No, not just
Right.
not just a mighty one at that, but they
Mighty Mouse is somebody completely different. Mighty Mouse would have gotten double.
Yeah, they couldn't find anyone to run against
Right.
Mayor Bob, and so he won. It is notable, but I think there's a small group of people in Purcellville who are unhappy, and I think that they just use this as the best and perhaps their only opportunity to show a dissenting voice.
Right. The only real swing was in Hamilton, which is a tiny hamlet. It's got about 180 some odd people
Right.
who voted. Anything interesting there, do you think?
No, it's hard. I'm hard pressed to find an example of an incumbent mayor anywhere, in a small town or a medium-sized town or a large town that loses a re-election by something like 3-1, like the incumbent mayor did. But again, I think it was a very small number of people who were voting. I don't exactly know what happened there. I will say that that overall, I think the town election showed that people are happy with the way generally the local government is run. Incumbents ruled. Turnout was up in all places except for Purcellville, which I thought was very interesting.
Right.
But turnout was up, and this is an off year, so measured against 2008, that's kind of impressive. It shows that people had a real interest in the elections. And then just the one other thing is that I think people I think it shows that people are happy with, again, the way towns are run, like Leesburg and Purcellville, where the budgets are solid, the tax rate has been kept in line, and they don't have to worry about very controversial things like transportation funding and schools.
Well, I guess that segues into the next point, where if people are so happy with their towns and incumbents are getting elected and reelected and reelected, what's the difference between the towns in the county and in the state, where you've seen obviously a lot of shifting back and forth, Republican board to Democratic board to Republican board, Democrats here, Republicans there. There's a lot of changing there, but why so much stability in the towns?
Well, I think first of all, I think that state elections as well as county elections tend to be much more politicized. That's not to say that there was a lot of politics going on in Purcellville. I think that there was, but I think that those are heavily invested in money, and there's a lot of advertising and campaigning going on. And I think that also, states and county governments have to take care of things like, transportation, which is a hot button issue, education, very controversial issue, even at the county level. Towns don't have that. In towns, take care of the sidewalks, taxes,
take care of sidewalks.
water, potholes, garbage pickup, and these towns are being run exceptionally well, and a lesson could probably be learned by the state and county government in terms of how Leesburg and Purcellville are doing.
You mentioned that for this year, as compared to the last town elections, the turnout rate was up, but still woefully low.
As happens in local elections.
It does happen in local elections, but is there, there was a movement a couple of months ago to move these town elections from the first Tuesday in May to with everybody else. I mean,
in November.
In November, wouldn't it make sense? I mean, there is an election every year in Virginia. Wouldn't it make sense to put them all together? I
think it only makes sense in terms of if towns like Leesburg, Percival, and these other towns find that there is inherently the cost is too high for them to do these kind of things. And I haven't necessarily heard that. I don't think that these are high budget elections. I think that there is some value in having them earlier in the year, because if they did take place in November, they would get overshadowed by presidential elections in the Senate.
But don't you think you'd have more people in those towns who would have a voice in it if they're out there already voting for their senator or their governor or what have you? To be out there would be more voices, and I think that's never a bad thing necessarily.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just think that the issues that are so important at the local level would get a lot more attention, and I think people would have time to focus on them if they took place in April and May. I think that those would all get very overshadowed if they took place in November.
And moving from the local and town level to the state and national level, the Loudoun Times-Mirror and you, Nicholas, had an interview this week with our Senator Jim Webb. Some really interesting stuff in there. I want to start with his response to you about health care and his concerns at the end of the day, that he wants to go back and work on that bill a little bit, not repeal it, but work on aspects of it.
Well, the reason why I asked him about Senator Webb, about health care, is because I was struck when the evening of Scott Brown's election in the Senate, to the Senate of Massachusetts in January, the health care debate was still going on. And I was struck by a statement that Senator Webb had issued that evening, where he basically said, I don't think we should do any more votes on health care until Scott Brown is seated. And so that, I think, was an interesting point. I asked him about that and what that meant for healthcare. He ended up voting in favor of healthcare, but it was interesting because it showed his maverick streak, which I do think he has. And he speaks very candidly, and he's not afraid to shake the tree a little bit sometimes. But he said, he felt healthcare was necessary, but he also said that he felt that there were a lot of things he couldn't defend in the bill, that he didn't like the process, which was very instructive.
I can't imagine many people like that process.
But especially him, I think it really bothered him. He said he voted with Republicans 17 times on procedural issues on the floor. And he also made a point of saying that he felt that we should go in there and dramatically fix the bill, which was very interesting. Not repeal it, but fix it. So that really struck me, and it's indicative of the kind of person he is. I think that he some people say he shoots from the hip. I think he's a very thoughtful person and extremely intelligent on foreign relations and armed services issues.
Is he your new Senate maverick now that Senator McCain doesn't want that title anymore?
I think there are a lot of people, given today's political climate, that would like to be called mavericks. So I think you'll see people attuned to that a lot more. I think that he's got, I asked him about re-election. He hasn't made a decision yet. If he runs in 2012, I think he'll have a very competitive race.
And there'll be a lot of Virginia Republicans, I'd imagine, lining up for that, including potentially George Allen.
Right. That would be a rematch on their very, very close 2006 race. I think the one thing about Senator Webb that was most interesting is how populist he is. I was struck by a lot of the themes that he touched on in the Q&A that I did with him, and also his speech to Loudoun Democrats that evening, where he was really kind of honing in on populist tones. And that's good, except that tends to get very divisive. It gets you headlines and it's dog whistle politics. But I think once you start to set up class warfare, politics, where you talk about, it's the laborers versus the corporations, and Wall Street versus the mom and pop shops, that can tend to get very alienating. So, people got to be careful about that.
Well, it's always interesting around here in Loudoun County, be it at the town level or the state or national level. For Nicholas Graham, I'm David Onofrio. This has been Talk with the Times.